Hello and welcome. In this episode, we're going to talk about building an asset repository, particularly a technical aspect repository. There are certainly more repositories, and we'll talk more about that. In TOGAF, we have the ADM, the architectural development method, which I live and die from as an architect and engineer. We have the taxonomy of architecture viewpoints, and this is pretty much what I build my repositories around, these various catalogs that you see here in this view. So as you know, an asset is a useful and valuable thing, person, quality, etc. And managing assets, as you can see here, can be a challenging thing. So like everything in life, there's a flow. It is object-oriented. It has features. And this is why we need to build some sort of method to manage the assets that we deal with in a day-to-day basis. Now, I use the Open Group Architecture Framework, TOGAF's architecture, taxonomy of architecture viewpoints. I just refer to it as architecture viewpoints. And you can see there's some catalogs here for business architecture, data architecture, application architecture, and technology architecture. I refer to all of these within my repository as technology assets, all right? Business has a technology or a technological aspect to it, and of course, everything else does. So I don't necessarily manage my core diagrams in the repository, or even my extended diagrams, but it is important that we understand what our assets are and that we keep them in a common place to manage them. Now, there are several types of asset management topics, if you will. There's financial asset management, which is managing your investment portfolio, stocks, bonds, and funds. And then there's enterprise asset management, or EAM. And this is for tracking and maintaining physical assets like machinery, buildings, infrastructure, and those kind of things. And then there's IT asset management, or ITAM. This is for managing software, hardware, and digital assets. There's also real estate asset management. I think we can all figure out what that one is. And there's infrastructure asset management. And this can be, of course, in the real world, roads, utilities, and bridges, but also software infrastructure that your network is based off of, your server farms based off of, and even your implementation of things like desktop machines and other devices within your office or offices. So what I tend to do in a technical asset management repository is blend the technical infrastructure with the applications, software, and other digital assets, along some other things, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Now, you don't have to use TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework, or even be certified. I just say it helps. I like to have at least one certified TOGAF engineer in the shop to help other teammates. But the most important thing is to understand what your enterprise continuum is, or your shop's continuum. Often when I go into companies and help them set up their continuum, we may refer to this as their company name, continuum, right? So the enterprise continuum is composed of your repositories, right? Your requirement repository, your architecture repository is which we're going to be focused on, your design stores maintained separately, and your configuration management database. But these are the repositories that I'm talking about, and our focus is on architecture repository. And the architecture repository has your meta model, which is very important, more advanced. We'll talk about it later on. It's not more advanced, but managing your meta model or meta models can be a complicated subject. We do that out in our big data repository using advanced analytics that helps us mine our data, use it for our learning models, and so on. The architecture landscape is what I'm primarily focused on in this conversation. However, you need to have a reference library. I keep this separate from our technology and asset repository, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. And then your SIB, your standards information base. This is part of your governance. So we split governance into governance platforms and tooling versus the artifacts, documentation, and so on that we need for governance. And then the other things are your governance log. And more importantly, especially with human assets, are your architecture capabilities, the skills and abilities of your human stakeholders, and even any AI and machine learning that you're using to augment this particular area of your delivery. All right. Now, this is an example project that we've been working on together for a year, almost a year, for this fictitious company called Arco. And it's for a knowledge management system project, and this is release 1. Every project is dependent on your architecture repository. As you're going through and implementing your architecture, you have your architecture catalog, which leads into other exposure of particular assets you may be using. Now, when I'm using the term assets, as I defined what an asset is, you do not want to keep or manage those assets in your project. You want to manage them in the proper repository, the proper Sparx project. So when we get into things like detailed design assets and we start drilling down into deployment views and we start getting into software design, and even code, then these assets are managed in specific places. Like code, for example, is going to be in our particular case, our Git repository, but you could be using any source code control platform, SCC, that you want. But our platforms, applications, the APIs, the microservices, all of those are going to be in our technical asset repository. So let's jump into building one from scratch. This is what our asset repository may look like at the end of this episode. However, this is the way that I did it 10, 15, 20 years ago, all right? It just used class elements. They were composite. They allowed me to drill down into other packages where the assets, namespaces, packages over here in browser for each one of the asset areas. When navigation cells came out, really opened up everything. It allowed us to actually expose what the assets were. We could select any of these and they would drill down into them. So let's build this from scratch. So here I've started a completely blank project. We know it's blank. If we roll over to a construct tab and we go over here to project management, QA, statistics, you can see there's nothing in here, right? There's just one package and it's the root node that you see right here. So what we're going to do is, as we normally do, we're going to create a starting package simply called main. You can call this anything you want. We call it main. You can put any diagram type you want in there. We're going to use class. And this is going to be our main landing page. So we're going to go to start and we're going to go to model diagrams, hit the drop down manage and set as default. So every time stakeholders that have access to this repository, this project, it'll launch and it'll land right on this main page. Now you want to plan as much as you can ahead of time. Let's just hit the space bar, go down to documents and bring in a blank document artifact here. And we're going to open it up, start with none. And I did this ahead of time. This is typically what I use or give to any organization. And we're going to start with these asset categories. So that's what we're going to use to name our namespaces, our packages over in the browser for each one of the repository packages. Now to save time, I've gone ahead and added the packages. I renamed the document, understanding our TAR, technical asset repository. I'll go ahead and open it up. And I've also created these packages, these namespaces for each one of them. Let's go ahead and close the document. And what we're going to do next is, I don't need main open. Let's bring in the first one. These are in alphabetical order, and you can always sort them by right-clicking on the root folder or whatever folder that you want to sort under, and then resort the order. It did move main in alphabetical order, so I just slide it back up to the top. All right, so our first one is API. Let's just drag and drop this diagram in here, and we're using navigation cells. Much better. Don't need an image, just bring in a blank navigation cell. All right. So I've created all of these navigation cells in our main from the packages that we had built. All right. I did not include the sub packages yet. We'll do that here in a moment. And we just dragged and dropped them any way we wanted in here. They came in alphabetical order right from the browser here. We're going to go to layout. We're going to go to diagram layout, and let's just choose neat and see what happens. And that really didn't do anything. How about box? A little better. Yeah, I'll go with this. This is a good starting point. Now we're going to make all of this fit in a diagram. Pan and zoom is also in the layout tab. You can select it. I have pan and zoom already in my default layout, and we're just going to make it fit. So made everything fit, and I can always slide around using pan and zoom, right? The next thing we want to do is start adding some colors here to differentiate each one of the categories from the others, all right? So let's just start the first one. So in the API one that's here, we're in the layout tab. We can go in and play around with some background colors, and let's just choose a green right now. Now I can't see the letters. So what I'm going to do here in styles is just make the font white, and I want it to be a little bigger, a little bolder. So let's just go bold. We'll stay with Calibri for the font. You can choose anything you want and go 22 and see how it fits. All right. It might be a little bit large because I do want to be consistent and make all of these fit within one row within each one of the cells. So since we've done one style here, let's see if everything's going to work here. So what we're going to do is select the API one. We've already selected it. We're in the layout tab, and we're going to use this little ink dropper, pen, whatever. We're going to pick up the style. And then what we're going to do is select everything here and then use the paintbrush to apply the style. And you can see the font is a little too large. So what we're going to do is go back over here and change this font size from 22. Let's go to 18 here. A little better. And we'll stick with this for a little bit here. Now you can work in any order you want, start at the end, start in the middle, wherever, right? And you can come up here to this paint bucket and you can pick any colors you want, you know, that makes sense or are appealing to you. You can also hit the drop down again, go to more colors here and pick even deeper colors. Let's try this one right here. And then go around and start coloring at each one of your elements. You can grab data warehouse as an example here and say, hey, I want to go up here and make this background color the paint bucket. I want to make it blue, all right? And then continue to go around and get the coloring scheme that you want to use, however creative you are. Once we get our background colors, we're going to look at this. And some of these things are kind of hard to see, like governance here. So what we're going to do is change the font color here to something that might fit within this coloring scheme. That works for now. We'll try that. Maybe I'm not a very creative person, so that's as good as it's going to get, all right? And then patterns, I can barely see that. So let's change this font color here, something dark red maybe, something like that, all right? And then you can go through here, change your coloring scheme, just hand it off to your human factors group or your graphics department and say, hey, color these to make them appealing and easy to navigate, right? Now, speaking of navigation, you can leave them in this order just like that and call it a day, or you can start to move things around. Applications are the biggest one to me, so I like to have that there. Service layer, this architecture, I like to have it at the top. Let's get this out of here. And data warehouse, I like to have on the right here, right? So I'm going to roll the mouse button and zoom out a little bit here. So I've got some room to play with. So make this fit within here. Let's just grab all of these, pull them off to the side, left justify, sort them equally down so I can create something to work with. Drag this one over here, left justify, evenly down, and now we can start working here. So I want to lay these things out so they fit in the page, they're easy to understand, and I can get to them quickly. So applications is one, patterns another one. I'm going to make it a little smaller to fit there, something like that. Change the size of the cells, anything you want. Applications is big, so I want it to stick out as one of the largest ones. Microservices and APIs are important, a little different, but I want to just kind of bring them out here. I might size them up so they fit as we're going forward, but let's see how everything else fits. Underneath data warehouse, so yeah, I'm going to move this over. I'm going to move this over. I would like to have governance prominent, but data warehouse is more important to me, so do something like that. Again, do anything you want. Cloud is big, and depending on the size, kind of using a heat map type approach for sizing these as far as importance, whether you're using the factor of dollar investment or what have you. Probably would make the human assets the largest thing in here because that's the most valuable thing. Data is very important. So use any approach that you want. And then security is mission critical. So do something like that. Data management, all right? So now what we can do is we can say, hey, I want to see how these fit across. So I can go about that wide. That still works here. Again, humans kind of big deal. So might make that a little bit larger. Do something like this. And size these any way you want so that they fit and they're easy to get to. All right, now I think I got the shape, size, and organization the way that I want and the order that I want. And I had to change the font height size to 16, just simply by going here, change it to 16 so that I could get it in one row, one line, right? And then let's go ahead and zoom in, make it fit. There we go. And we're almost done, but we have something very important that we need to do next. And that is to bring in link or links to your document repository, all right? So they're able to get to these assets for reference to what is in each one of these folders. And there's a couple of ways to do that. The toolbox, you can go all the way on to common elements and you'll see hyperlink here. Another way is just picking about where you want to put it. Hit the space bar, go down to common elements, and in this quick access menu, you see hyperlink. It brings in a hyperlink. We're going to go ahead and put it right here. Double click it. It is a file type. We want to open is the action. And we're going to put in the reference to our document store, our file share, our FTP server, whatever that address is to get to this. And then we can give it an alias such as asset, repo, or repository, or whatever you're referencing. The document repository, the asset repository that's being used for this project here. And then you can size the font any way you want. All right, we're going to start wrapping up here. We've started our asset repository. In the next episode, we're actually going to populate that. Let's go ahead and right click here. Let's go to content. And then what we want to do is collapse all branches. There's the root node. Let's rename this root node here to asset repository. Call it anything you want. Asset repo. Always change it. But once you start getting going, you're going to want to not change the root node. This root node may be used across other programs or separate areas that are walled off, firewalled off for contractors or others, and you want to create an asset repository for those particular stakeholders. Often we're working on projects that are under NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and you need to lock things down, right? You might want to keep some assets not in the view of others, especially your security assets. All right. So anyways, this is a start to our asset repository. In the next episode, we're actually going to build this out and then show how it can be used. And then in following episodes, we're going to do some automated scripting to actually go out to the SQL instance and bring any assets in that we need specific to projects. So look forward to getting to that. Until that next episode, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate the support. The comments, the questions, the emails, all of them have been very motivating for us. And really look forward to getting to some more topics. 2025 is going to be a very exciting year. So let's get to it, huh? Until then, happy modeling.